High in the Ural Mountains, searchers dig through frozen snow and find a tent, slashed open from the inside, half buried in a drift. Nearby, footprints in socks and bare feet lead away into the darkness, then vanish. 9 young hikers are gone. What happened to them would become one of the strangest unsolved mysteries in modern history. In late January 1959, a group of 10 students and young graduates set out from the city of Sverdlovsk. Led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, they were experienced skiers, seeking a Grade 3 hiking certification through the remote northern Urals. Their destination was Gora Otorten, a mountain whose name in the Mansi language means, "Do not go there." The route was demanding, even for seasoned outdoorsmen. Temperatures fell far below freezing, and the terrain offered no shelter once above the tree line. One member, Yuri Yudin, turned back early due to illness, unknowingly saving his own life. The remaining 9 pressed on into the wilderness. The group kept a shared diary, its pages filled with jokes, songs, and small complaints about the cold. Photographs from their cameras show smiling faces around campfires, unaware of what lay ahead. These images would later become the last testimony of 9 lives. By February 1st, the group had reached the eastern slope of a mountain the local Mansi people called Kholat Syakhl, the Dead Mountain. Rather than descend to the shelter of the forest, they made camp directly on the open slope. It was a decision that would puzzle investigators for decades. They were due to send a telegram announcing their safe return by February 12th. That date came and went in silence. Families grew anxious, and by February 20th, alarmed friends and relatives demanded a search. Soviet authorities dispatched student volunteers, soldiers, and aircraft into the frozen wilderness. On February 26th, searchers found the tent, collapsed and cut open from within. Inside lay boots, food, and warm clothing, untouched. 9 sets of footprints, some belonging to bare or sock-clad feet, led downhill toward the tree line over a kilometer away. It made no sense. Experienced hikers, trained to survive brutal cold, had fled their only shelter without proper clothing, into a night where temperatures dropped past -25 degrees Celsius. Something had frightened them enough to abandon everything. The first 2 bodies were found beneath a large cedar tree at the forest edge. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, wearing only thin underclothes. The tree's lower branches were broken, as though someone had climbed it, perhaps to see something, or to escape something, in the dark. Nearby, searchers found the body of Igor Dyatlov himself, along with Zenaida Kolmogorova, scattered across the slope as if they had tried and failed to climb back toward the tent. Their positions suggested exhaustion, disorientation, perhaps a desperate final struggle against the cold. A 5th body, Rustem Slobodin, was recovered with a fractured skull, though the injury alone was not judged fatal. The investigators labeled the cause of death for these first 5 as hypothermia, but this was only the beginning of the mystery, not the end. The remaining 4 hikers were not found until May, when the spring thaw finally revealed them buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine below the cedar tree. What searchers discovered there deepened the horror rather than resolving it. Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov had suffered massive internal injuries, broken ribs, and crushed chests, yet without any external wounds or broken skin. A Soviet medical examiner compared the force required to that of a car crash, in terrain with no vehicles, no avalanche debris, no visible cause. Stranger still, Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her lips, along with other soft tissue. Officials attributed this to decomposition and scavenging animals during the months buried in snow and meltwater. Not everyone found that explanation convincing. Investigators also noted elevated levels of radioactivity on some of the hikers' clothing. No conclusive source was ever identified, though some of the group had links to a nearby closed nuclear facility. The detail added another thread to an already tangled case. The official Soviet investigation closed in May 1959. Its conclusion strikingly vague. The hikers died from a compelling natural force. The case files were sealed, marked secret, and the region was closed to hikers for the next 3 years. For decades, the files remained largely inaccessible, feeding speculation that authorities were hiding something: a military accident, a weapons test, or an encounter the state did not wish to acknowledge. In the vacuum of official silence, theories multiplied. Some pointed to the Mansi people, indigenous to the region, suggesting the hikers had trespassed on sacred ground and been attacked. But investigators found no evidence of other human tracks near the tent, and the theory was ultimately dismissed for lack of proof. Others proposed a yeti or unknown creature stalked the group in the darkness. It made for a compelling story, but nothing in the physical evidence supported it. The forest held no tracks, no remains, no sign of any predator large enough to cause such injuries. A more grounded theory emerged around infrasound, low-frequency vibrations generated by wind moving across the mountain's smooth dome shape, known as a Kármán vortex street. Some researchers proposed this could induce panic, nausea, and disorientation strong enough to drive people from shelter in blind terror. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the case, and prosecutors ultimately endorsed a different explanation: an avalanche, though not one large enough to bury the tent, but a slab of snow slipping just enough to injure the hikers and force a panicked retreat. In 2021, researchers from institutions in Switzerland and Russia published a study modeling how such a small slab avalanche, combined with the terrain and the hikers' own snow cutting into the slope, could produce injuries consistent with those found. It offered the most scientifically grounded explanation yet. Yet, critics note the theory does not fully explain the timeline, why some hikers, once safely at the tree line, would then remove clothing and wander back uphill, or why injuries occurred hours after the tent was abandoned, rather than in that first chaotic moment. A small fire had been lit near the cedar tree, its ashes found among broken branches. It burned only briefly before going out, whether from lack of fuel, failing strength, or something else entirely. No one can say with certainty. The site itself carries an old weight. The Mansi name Kholat Syakhl, Dead Mountain, predates the tragedy by generations, tied to an earlier local legend of 9 hunters who died there long before. Whether coincidence or omen, the name has only deepened the story's unease. In 2015, Yuri Yudin, the 10th member who had turned back before the tragedy, died still without answers. He had spent the rest of his life attending memorials, giving interviews, and carrying the quiet burden of having survived by chance alone. Today, a memorial stands in Yekaterinburg, and a mountain pass now bears their name, Dyatlov Pass. Hikers still travel there each winter, some drawn by respect, others by morbid curiosity, retracing the final steps of 9 people who never came home. No single theory has ever fully satisfied every detail of the evidence. The fear that emptied a tent, the injuries without cause, the radiation, the missing tissue, the strange calm of a fire lit and then abandoned. Perhaps several forces converged that night, each explaining a fragment of the whole. What remains certain is simpler and more human. 9 young people, full of plans and friendship, walked into the mountains in the winter of 1959 and did not walk out. Their diary entries, their photographs, their unfinished journey are what we have left of them. Kholat Syakhl still stands where it always has, indifferent to the question mark it left behind. The wind moves across its slope the same way it did that night, and somewhere in that motion, perhaps, lies an answer we will never fully hear.